Hello, this is Justin, and this video is about stocks that billionaires are buying right now. I'm filming today on May the 25th, and in the past 2 weeks, a lot of billionaires and a lot of top investors and hedge fund managers had to release their holdings and trading activity to the SEC, which stands for the Security and Exchange Commission. Because they have to release it to the SEC, this information is public and we can see what stocks that billionaires are holding and what they're trading and their recent trading activity. And I think this is very important because right now we're in the midst of the coronavirus pandemic and an economic downturn. So things are very volatile. People aren't sure what's happening with the economy and with the stock market, and stocks are pretty unpredictable. But a good way to navigate your way with the stock market is to see what the top investors and billionaires are buying and trading, because they have a ton of experience with investing in stocks, and learning from them is a good way to really find out which stocks you should be buying, which stocks you should be selling, which stocks you should be holding. And they can provide a lot of wisdom with investing activity. So let's look at the stocks that a bunch of billionaires are buying. I'm going to look at 7 billionaires. All of them are very big investors and have successful track records. Actually, I think it's 6 billionaires because one of them I don't think is a billionaire anymore. But all of these are very big names in investing and in the business world. So let's see what they're doing with their stocks. So the website I'm going to use to find all this information is dataroma.com, which compiles the trading activity and holdings of the top investors, the top hedge fund managers, and a lot of billionaires, and it's accessible to the public. So I'll also link that down in the description below if you want to check it out. So the first guy we're going to look at is Warren Buffett, and his holding company is Berkshire Hathaway. And he is probably the most famous investor because he has such a good track record, but recently he lost a lot of money, and this is his holding activity. So he has Apple, Bank of America, a ton of companies. Most of these he bought years ago and maybe decades ago. So I'm not going to go through all of them because most of these stocks he gained way back, and he acquired these stocks a long time ago. But as you can see, there has been a lot of recent activity with his holdings, so let's check that out. So this is Warren Buffett's recent trading activity. This is Q1 of 2020. So keep in mind that until March, there was no crisis with the stock market because coronavirus hadn't reached America yet and the rest of the world. It was still in China. Even so, the stock market was at its peak and it was heading for a correction. So let's see. Warren Buffett mostly sold a lot of stocks in the first quarter of 2020. So he sold Southwest Airlines, General Motors, and all of these stocks. And he bought PNC Financial Services, Delta Airlines, and United Airlines holdings. And I think with these two companies, United Airlines and Delta Airlines, they probably suffered a lot because of the coronavirus pandemic and the economic downturn and all the travel restrictions. So obviously their stocks have gone down a lot, which makes them very cheap companies. And I think Warren Buffett probably sees them as an investment opportunity because now it's very easy to acquire them at a very cheap price. And obviously the travel restrictions aren't going to last forever. Eventually it's going to be lifted, maybe as soon as next month, according to a lot of governments talking about lifting the lockdown restrictions and the travel restrictions ahead of summer so people can go on summer vacation and travel abroad. So probably the airline stocks dropped a lot, and the reason why he bought Delta Airlines and United Airlines, I believe, is because these two airlines do a lot of international flights. So they probably suffered way more than Southwest Airlines, which does a lot of domestic flights, and it's more domestic flight heavy. And because the travel restrictions are restricting travel across different countries and across borders, the airlines that mostly do international flights or are just international flight heavy with their profits are going to suffer the most in terms of the stock market price, which makes them a lot more cheap. And maybe Warren Buffett thinks that yes, they will suffer because of this crisis and because of the travel restrictions, but this is short term, and eventually when things go back to normal, the airlines will regain their share prices and he can make a profit. So let's look at the next guy, Carl Icahn of Icahn Capital Management. So Carl Icahn, obviously he has Icahn Enterprises, and that is his conglomerate company. It's also his holding company. Icahn Capital Management is his company that he uses to invest in different stocks, but he also uses Icahn Enterprises. So Icahn Enterprises is his conglomerate and his holding company, while Icahn Capital Management is his investment arm. So you see all of these companies, it's pretty diverse. There's energy companies, there are other conglomerates, and yeah, it's a pretty diverse holding, and you can see recently he bought a lot of stocks. So let's check that out. So in the first quarter of 2020, Carl Icahn just bought stocks. He really didn't sell anything. And I think this is a pretty good decision. Because since stocks have fallen so much, it creates a lot of good buying opportunities when stocks are very cheap. And right now stocks are very cheap. So it's a good opportunity to buy stocks. Just make sure that you are doing your research and you're buying the right stocks. So he bought this petroleum company, he bought Hertz, Wellbit, Newell Brands, Cheniere Energy, which is a natural gas and I think also petroleum company. Not sure about that part, but it's an energy company, and Dalek US Holdings. So he bought a lot of that. You can do more research into it if you want, but these are the stocks that Carl Icahn are buying. And the next person we should look at is Bill Gates, one of the richest men in the world, very famous, probably all of you know him, and his investment arm is called the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation Trust, because now he's focused on his foundation work and his charity work, and he needs to grow the assets of his charity so he can use more of it to benefit the world. So this is his holdings, and he also has very diverse holdings. You could research more into it, but you can see for the most part in terms of recent activity, he bought a lot of stocks and he only sold stocks in Berkshire Hathaway, which is Warren Buffett's holding company. So let's see his quarter 1 2020 investment activity. So Bill Gates bought Schrodinger, Apple, Amazon, Alibaba, which is basically the Amazon of China, Alphabet, which is Google's holding company, and probably a different class of Alphabet stocks here. There's Twitter, and he sold Berkshire Hathaway. So you can see Bill Gates is using this setback in the stock market to acquire stocks cheaply. And I think this is very smart, because now that the market isn't at its peak and it's fallen a lot, there's a lot of undervalued stocks, and Bill Gates is taking advantage of that. The next guy we're going to look at is David Einhorn, and he is probably the only person on the list today that I'm going to talk about who is not a billionaire. I think he used to be a billionaire. I'm not completely sure about that, but I'm including him because he is very big in the investment world, and he used to manage billions of dollars, and he used to have a very good track record. But in the past few years, he lost a lot of money and he did very poorly. A lot of his investors pulled out of his fund, which is called Greenlight Capital. And his last few years have been terrible for him. But before that, he has a very good track record, and that is why he's so big in the investment world. So let's look at the stocks he's holding right now. So again, very diverse, but also a lot of these stocks are new stocks, and he's trading quite a bit in the past quarter, but mostly, like with Bill Gates and Carl Icahn, he's buying more than he's selling. So let's see his trading activity. In the first quarter of 2020, David Einhorn bought all these companies. So CNX Resources is a natural gas company. I also hold that. Air Cap Holdings, I actually sold that a few months ago. Bright House Financial, I also own, and he's been adding on that. So that's a good sign for me, because it means that I should continue to hold these stocks if top investors think it's a good buy. But I should also do further research into it, because top investors, yes, they have had successful track records, but they're not always right. So you should do some research yourself. But if you're just picking the stocks that the top investors are already picking, that's a pretty safe pool of stocks to be looking at, because they're vetting stocks for you, and they're basically just providing you with a pool of stocks that top investors have vetted, which is very good for you, and you should take advantage of that. So he also bought a lot of these companies, and he sold all these companies. And Consol Energy, if you guys don't know, it used to be part of, so Consol Energy and CNX Resources used to be in the same company, but Consol Energy now is focused on coal, and CNX is focused on natural gas. And they used to be one company. I actually used to own the combined company, but then the natural gas part of the company was spun off, and that is now called CNX Resources. The next guy we'll look at is Mason Hawkins, who runs Longleaf Partners. So this is his holdings. Seems like he has changed almost all of his holdings in the past quarter except CenturyLink. Seems like there's a balance between buying and selling during this time. So let's look at his trading activity in more detail. Mason Hawkins bought William Coase, Raytheon Technologies, all of these companies, Hyatt Hotels, Park Hotels. I think with Hyatt and Park, he's taken advantage of how hard hit the share prices for hotel companies have taken. And because of the travel restrictions and with the lockdown, the hospitality industry suffered a lot. And probably the share prices for hotel companies suffered a lot. But again, the travel restrictions and the lockdown are temporary. When things go back to normal, all that business will come back. So he's taking advantage of the low prices for the hotels, and he's buying it at this time, which I think is smart. And he sold Fairfax Financial, CNX Resources, CNH Industrial, Alphabet, Comcast, Mattel, which is a toy company, General Electric, CK Hutchinson, and CK Asset Holdings. So let's look at our next guy, Seth Klarman, who runs Baupost Group. So Seth Klarman has a lot of holdings, and the majority of them he has traded in the past quarter. And you can see that he is buying more than he is selling. So again, because the stock market is correcting itself, and also because stock prices are tumbling, there's a lot of undervalued opportunities, and you should try to take advantage of that. So let's look at his trading activity in more detail. So Seth Klarman has bought these stocks: HP, eBay, Viacom, Corvo, Cars, McKesson. I'm not going to read all of them out loud, but you can see for yourself. You can take a screenshot if you want to take some ideas from these people. And he sold these stocks. And try to look at stocks that have been traded by multiple of these top investors, because then when multiple investors are vetting them out for you, it gives you a better idea to either buy or sell the stock, and it gives you more confidence when you do research, because you know that your opinion of the stock can be backed by the actions of the top investors, because the top investors not only just talk about which stocks you should buy and which stocks you should sell, they're actually putting their money where their mouth is and putting their own money into stocks they invest in and selling the stocks they want to get rid of or reduce. And the last guy we'll talk about is David Tepper, who is in charge of Appaloosa Management. So David Tepper owns a lot of stocks, and it seems like every single one of them he has traded in the past quarter. And that makes sense because of how volatile things are, and he wants to really adjust his holdings. So let's look at his trading activity in more detail. So these are the stocks that David Tepper are buying. I see a lot of technology stocks actually, which makes sense because the technology stocks were at the peak of the stock market peak, and they suffered a lot from the downturn. So he's taking advantage of cheap prices, and he sold all of these stocks. So obviously there are stocks that other investors, other top investors I've already shown you have traded, and you can compare what David Tepper and the other investors are doing with the same stocks. Like Alibaba, they came up with other investors. So did Alphabet, came up with a lot of the other investors. Caesars Entertainment did, Cheniere also. So yeah, you can see what the top investors are buying and selling right now. And it's a good idea to look at what billionaires are buying or selling, because it gives you ideas on which stocks to buy, which stocks to sell, and which stocks to hold. So I hope this video helped you. Thank you for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe, and hit the bell notification so you get notified when new videos come out. Also, follow me on Instagram where you can DM me, and follow me on Medium where I write about the same topics I talk about on YouTube. The links for my Instagram and Medium are in the description below, so check that out, and I'll see you next time.